Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kasten Kickstart Part 7. So it's the seventh part of this. It's 7 days in a row. So the idea is that before Kasten 8.5 comes out, you will have basic knowledge of Kasten and the ability to install it and use it and reap the benefits of the incredible things that are coming in 8.5. And I've already talked about those, and you'll see them in a second. Reminder, at the end, I will publish all of the commands in here in this series, but for now, I just want everyone to follow along. So what are we going to do first today? Well, we're going to do something very simple today. We're going to back up our Kasten cluster. Remember, we've installed a single node operating system, single node Kubernetes cluster on K3s on a VM in Proxmox, a Rocky Linux VM. We've installed KubeVirt, which is the KVM edition, right? That allows you to create virtual machines in Kubernetes. And we installed Kasten. We've also given ourselves access to the cluster. We created a token yesterday, and we're leveraging token authentication. So today we're going to do our first backups. And the first thing we want to do today, in fact, we'll probably only do that today. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to step by step. Today we're going to turn on disaster recovery, which is a must, because disaster recovery allows you to completely restore your Kasten application. So in other words, remember, just as something to keep in mind, your Kasten is installed on your cluster, okay? If that cluster goes, you lose your Kasten. So the best thing to do is to leverage Kasten DR, Kasten Disaster Recovery, which is going to basically take a copy of your Kasten brains and put it somewhere else. And because you have your snapshots exported, which is backup, so all your workloads will be exported, you'll then be able just to hook into that and do your restores wherever you need to, okay? It's a very simple setup. So first of all, what are we going to do? We're going to leverage, there are different things you can leverage for this, by the way, for offsite, including VBR. However, big caveat, you can only send certain workloads to a Veeam repository, okay? And they have to be, as of right now, they have to be PVCs. Remember, a persistent volume, persistent volume claims. It's one of those mornings, a Saturday, but they have to be in block mode. Okay, so block mode you don't see, that often. In Harvester, it's experimental. So okay, and even if you're able to do that, you still have to have either an S3 or an NFS or something like that to keep the metadata, the retention. It can only keep the data in the VBR. So right now, I wouldn't even really consider it unless you have block mode and you're ready to do that. So we're going to leverage S3. It'll use a Copia repository. Copia is open source. Veeam runs it, but it's open source, and that's what Kasten by default uses. So we're going to create disaster recovery. To do that, we have to create a location profile. So somewhere outside of the cluster where we're going to keep our disaster recovery, right? It's like the config file, the config backup in Veeam, right? And also later where we're going to export our snapshots. So let's do that. So first of all, I'm going to go to my Object First Appliance here, and I'm going to create a bucket. I already did one here, but I'll create another one. Kasten 01, I'll call this one. And enable versioning by default. We want this to be immutable. Always create immutable. In today's, what does AI say? In the ever-changing landscape, in today's ever-changing landscape, you want immutable. That's just a given, okay? So we're going to create that. We're going to call it Kasten 01. Off it goes and creates it. There it is, Kasten 01. Remember that. And then I'm going to create some keys. Okay, create some keys for this. I'm going to put my password in for that. And it'll only bring the keys up once, so don't forget them. So let's keep that there. In fact, I can even copy this to a text file just in case, right? Because I might want to go and look at some things, and then I'll go, oh, what happened to my keys? You won't be able to get this secret key afterwards, all right? There's no way of getting it, so you got to get it now. If you don't get it now, you have to create another key. All right, I'm closing it, so I trust myself. Let's go to our Kasten. Well, first of all, let's see where is this located. This is a single node, and I'm going to use the IP address. 172 is my management cluster, so that's what I want to get to. And I'm going to add a location profile, and that's on the left-hand side in Kasten. Make certain I'm actually showing this. No, I'm not. See, this is what happens when I talk too much. Okay, there's Kasten. So here's the bucket I've just created. Kasten 01. I created some keys here, and I can see the keys I've created, of course. Can't see the secrets, but I've copied that luckily. All right, let's go back to Kasten. Profiles, and we want a location profile. We won't talk about infrastructure profile for now. Very rarely used, at least in my experience. We're going to create a location profile. This is where you're going to send your backups. So the snapshots are taken locally on your cluster, and then you export the snapshots to a location profile. Likewise, when you set up DR, disaster recovery, those get sent off of your cluster as well. There's no point keeping your disaster recovery on your cluster. Because if you lose your cluster, you've lost your disaster recovery. We're going to press create new profile. We'll give it a name, and I'll call object first, in case I have multiple providers here. And it's going to give you a list of different types you can use. You can use Amazon S3, Azure, Google Cloud Storage, NFS, SMB, so you can use SMB too. S3 compatible, that's what we want to use. Veeam repository, this is the one where it's tricky. You can't just use that. If you do have Veeam repository, you're going to have another one where you can send the metadata. And Veeam Data Cloud Vault, so that's a new one there. Let's use S3 compatible. I'm calling it object first because that's what I'm using. And let me find my keys. So I'll put in my access key first of all. Afterwards, I will put in my secret key. Then I need my endpoint. Okay, so my endpoint, HTTPS, and it's 1.2.6.8.0. And I mean, you could use the DNS if you want to. I'm just going to use this. I'm going to skip the certificate chain because I'm using a self-signed certificate. Region, in my case, default because I didn't set a region. Bucket name. I have to remember the bucket name. I made it simple, Kasten 01. And of course, I'm going to enable immutability. Non-immutable backups are just targets waiting to be attacked. So we're going to enable that. Now, it's going to check. It's going to validate that bucket to see if it fits, okay, if you've done it incorrectly. I mean, honestly, there's not much you can do incorrectly, but well, you could take off the, I guess, if you had an S3 provider that by default wasn't immutable, didn't have versioning on, then yeah. Okay, everything's fine. Now, it's going to set a protection period. This is really important because I've done this a few times in our lab to the great annoyance of our senior lab administrator because I took 90 days and then backed up some huge workload. And guess what? It's going to be there for 90 days unless you nuke the whole thing. So I'm not going to do that. And for test purposes, I'm going to bring this down to 3 days. I mean, really, 3 or something like that. Okay. But the main thing is everything is green. It says, yes, this bucket on this S3 provider is fine. It will work. And if you're more interested to find out anything deeper, you can go here, more about locked bucket setup. And that will take you, I'm pretty certain, to, yes, the Kasten documentation where you always want to hang out. All right, let's go to next. It's all ready to go. And it can even show you the YAML if you're interested. You got a YAML, so you could, automate this. We're going to do this a lot. And we're going to submit it, and we are happy. It's a happy bucket, okay? All ready to be filled. So, next step, again, this gets simpler and simpler. Every time Kasten comes out, or every big release, they make these things easier. Back in the old days, it was all command line. I know command line can be a bit challenging, and people like to do UI because it's simple and fast. Unless, of course, they're coding something. Where do we go? Well, for this disaster recovery setting up, we go to settings. And we go to set up disaster recovery, or DR, set up Kasten DR. Now, we need to use a profile. I've only got one, the one I just set up. So there we go. Got it there. Here's where you can use, and you have to use some kind of secret, okay? Because this is going to encrypt the Kasten DR backups. They're going to be encrypted. Otherwise, any hacker in the world could just take your Kasten DR and use it happily and thank you for it afterwards. So I'm going to use passphrase, but you could use HashiCorp Vault. You could use AWS Secret Manager, Azure Key Vault. And then you just type in your passphrase. Don't forget it. Okay, I'm going to do something really simple for this. And then catalogs snapshot configuration. Now, I'm not going to go into detail into this. I leave it at the default. Okay, so recommended if storage supports provisioning new volumes for existing snapshots. I'm just going to leave it at that. If you want to learn more about that, we can go into detail about that later on. This is a new system, and I did a post, I believe, or even a video earlier about the differences. For now, just leave that enabled. We're going to enable Kasten DR, and it's enabled. It's ready to go. Very important. This is crucially important. cluster ID. Save this cluster ID. It will be needed during the restore process. Okay, if you don't save that, you're in trouble. So I'm going to actually, right now, before I finish, type this, cluster ID. Save the file. Okay, I'm going to call it Kasten K01 DR. Okay, and I'll save that. Never save later, because if later doesn't come, you're in big trouble. So I'm going to call this what should I call this file? So I sometimes save these files with really strange names and I have no clue what they are. So I'm going to call this Kickstart Kasten. That'll do it. Kickstart Kasten file. That should give me a hint. Okay. All right, so we've saved that. It's enabled. What's it going to do? By default, it's going to back up very regularly. So let's go to our policies. It creates a policy. Okay, we don't have any policies yet, but this one's been created automatically hourly. Okay, I don't want it to go hourly for my demo. I'm going to change this, but hourly is the normal amount. But I can do this. This is just like a normal, which we'll see later, a normal policy. I'm going to change this to daily. Okay, only daily. And I'm not going to have like a yearly. We'll look at this later when we create a backup, but I'm just going to do this. Okay, and submit. Okay, and this will work like a normal policy. So you can go to dashboard and you will see this pop up. It will kick in by itself, but I'm going to force it just to make sure that it works. So I'll go back to policies and you're getting a preview of what we're going to do when we create a policy. Now, when I kick one off by default, it's going to ask me how long do I want the expiration for. I'm just going to keep this for 1 day, and it actually wants a time too. Well, I don't care any time at all. There we go. Continue, and off it goes. Go back to the dashboard and I can see this taking place, and hopefully it'll work. But that's like a preview of what we're going to do tomorrow with creating a real backup job, okay? So this will run. We can actually press on this and see some details. So it's snapshotting application components. If you press on this, you'll get even more details here once they start to fill up. This shouldn't take too terribly long, especially because this is pretty much, well, it is an empty Kasten, except for certain things. So it already has certain things in it, obviously, but there's no backups. Oh, and we have a failure right from the get-go. This is wonderful. I like it when it fails because then I can learn what I did wrong. Okay, backup target default is not available. Interesting. Okay, let me double check this and I will be right back. What has happened here? Oh, I'm back. Okay. Sorry, I went the wrong direction. It's been a long morning. So I fixed the issue. Also, my light went off. I don't think I had light on to begin with. This is what happens when you do a video on a Saturday. So what was the issue? And this goes back to something I forgot before. In fact, I don't think I forgot. I think Longhorn's documentation has changed this slightly. And the example there, which used to be on one page, is not the same example. My excuses, but nevertheless. So this is exclusively to do with Longhorns. This is our Longhorn here. Remember our storage? When you set up the volume snapshot class, okay? Remember we did that, and I'm just going to show you. Okay, and that's what I changed right now. So let's just look at that. When we set that up, and I'll just do volume. What's it called again? So we're going to there it is, Longhorn volume snapshot class. There's one parameter we have to set. This is only when you're dealing with Longhorn. You have to add this in the YAML file. Parameters type snap, okay? Because by default, it's BAK back, because Longhorn also can do backups, okay? So what I normally do is just copy a volume snapshot class YAML that I have lying around. This time I decided to recreate it from the documentation, and I skipped that. So what happened? Kasten tried to leverage this, and guess what? It freaked out because it couldn't do a snap type, and it wouldn't do it. And it got annoyed and said, no default, the default location is not available, which is totally misleading because I've got a location profile. Anyways, very simple thing. And don't worry, in the documentation, again at the end, in the examples, this will have this here, snap. So it's one of those little things, but you know, these things can happen. It's always fun. You can do a bit of troubleshooting. In fact, I realized right away it's the issue because the error said default location missing. It's like, what? I've got a location. Anyways, So let's go back and see what happened. It worked, obviously. And here you get all the little details of what it's done. There's some canister details. Here's the cube cuddle. You can copy that. You can see the action in details in YAML, view action. Let's look. That's exactly what it did. So pretty cool if you're into that kind of thing. View action details in YAML. So view action YAML, view action details YAML. I don't really know. I'll be honest, I don't know what the difference is. That seems to me the same thing. I don't want to go through line by line and compare them. Anyways, so what do we have now? We now have our disaster recovery set up. Now, if you want to restore, which we're not going to do today, you would just go to restore. You create a vanilla instance of Kasten on a different cluster, an empty cluster. You go to restore Kasten, and you just fill this out. You fill out what you need. Now, beforehand, you would have to add that location profile to the new Kasten, obviously. You'd add that, you'd put in that cluster ID, type in that secret passphrase we put in there, and it'll automatically then see and get access to the Kasten and be able to restore it. So it's a lot simpler. Okay, remember, type snap. You don't have to remember it. It'll be in the documentation. I need to remember, not just a copy off the Longhorn website. So that was a problem outside of Kasten in the Longhorn components. And so these chains of what's happening rely on various pieces. And so if one piece is incorrect, the other piece is not going to work. Everyone in IT knows that, but it's always fun to find this out again. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. That's it for part 7. We have Kasten DR. Well, in fact, if you maybe don't believe me, let's run it again. You know what? You can say, yeah, Jeff, sure. You like did something. You like, all right, let's run it again just so you can see. I don't trust myself. There we go. So we'll have this one go on the 29th. Now this will run by itself, remember, daily. Normally it's hour by default, but I'm going to run it daily because I don't want to fill up my test cluster. And this should be relatively quick. So you can see off it goes. And let's wait. Boom. See, that's already come up. And we'll just wait for it to finish. I see green. Excellent. I see all phases completed successfully. There we go. If it doesn't work at first, try again after reading documentation. See you tomorrow.